The rain drummed against the window like 1,000 tiny fingers, each drop carrying memories I thought I'd buried years ago. My name is Eliza Chen, and I never believed in second chances, until that night when the storm brought him back into my life. If you've ever felt that the universe has a strange way of bringing people together at exactly the right moment, then this is a story you won't want to miss. Stay with me until the end, because sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come disguised as ordinary moments on extraordinarily rainy nights. If you're enjoying this journey so far, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories that find the magic in everyday moments. Your support means everything, and I promise, this tale of unexpected connection is worth every minute. I'd been working late at the bookstore, Harper & Tales, a small independent shop I'd poured my life savings into 3 years ago after leaving my corporate job. The rain had started as a gentle mist around 7, but by closing time at 9, it had transformed into a furious downpour that turned Seattle's streets into rushing rivers. Just my luck, I muttered, locking the front door and testing it twice, a habit from childhood that my mother had instilled in me. Always check the door. Always be certain. The awning above the entrance offered minimal protection as I fumbled with my umbrella, which chose that precise moment to jam. A gust of wind sent rainwater cascading down my neck, soaking through my thin cardigan and sending a chill down my spine. Need some help with that? The voice came from my left, deep, slightly raspy, and unsettlingly familiar. When I turned, the world seemed to pause between heartbeats. Daniel? He looked different from the boy I'd known in college, his face more angular, stubble darkening his jaw, and small lines at the corners of his eyes that appeared when he smiled. But his eyes, those remarkable gray-green eyes that had once been my entire universe, remained unchanged. Eliza Chen. Of all the bookstores in all of Seattle, he said, stepping closer under the awning. His leather jacket glistened with raindrops. 10 years had passed since I'd last seen him, since the day we'd said goodbye at graduation, making empty promises to stay in touch while knowing our paths were diverging. He was headed to medical school on the East Coast, I was pursuing my MBA, determined to climb the corporate ladder. We were 22 and convinced we knew exactly what our lives should be. "What are you doing here?" I asked, still struggling with my stubborn umbrella. "Here in Seattle or here at your bookstore at closing time in the middle of a downpour?" His smile was cautious, as if testing whether we could still speak in the easy back and forth that had once been our language. "Both, I suppose." I gave up on the umbrella, tucking it under my arm. "I moved back 6 months ago. Pediatric practice on First Avenue." He hesitated. "And I've actually been to your store twice before. You were busy with customers, and I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." A car sped by, sending a wave of water toward the sidewalk. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, shielding me from the splash with his body. The gesture, so automatic, so characteristic of the boy I'd known, made something tighten in my chest. "My apartment's just 2 blocks away," I found myself saying. "If you wanted to catch up. Wait out the worst of the storm." The look of surprise on his face mirrored my own internal shock. I hadn't planned to invite him anywhere. In fact, I'd spent years carefully constructing a life where spontaneity had no place. "I'd like that," he said quietly. We made a run for it, splashing through puddles and laughing as we arrived at my building completely drenched. In the elevator, standing side by side in dripping clothes, I caught his reflection in the polished metal doors. He was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. My apartment was small but comfortable, bookshelves lining every available wall, plants crowding the windowsills, and a gray cat named Fitzgerald who regarded Daniel with suspicious yellow eyes from his perch on the couch. "Some things never change," Daniel said, gesturing to the overflowing bookshelves. "You always needed just one more book." I handed him a towel. Says the man who used to fall asleep with medical journals on his face. Fair point. We sat at my small kitchen table with mugs of hot tea, the rain creating a cocoon of white noise around us as we began the delicate process of filling in the gaps of 10 years. His residency in Boston. My corporate career and subsequent burnout. His divorce 2 years ago from a fellow doctor, a revelation that sent an unexpected jolt through me. My mother's cancer and recovery. The bookstore that had saved me when nothing else could. I always knew you'd end up surrounded by books, he said. Even when you were determined to be a high-powered executive. That version of me feels like someone I used to know, I admitted. What about you? Always wanted to be a pediatrician? His expression shifted, becoming more guarded. I went into medical school planning to specialize in cardiology. That changed after my sister's son was born. I set down my mug. Melissa had a baby? That's wonderful. The shadow that crossed his face told me I'd misjudged something fundamental. Jake was born with a congenital heart defect, Daniel said, his voice dropping. He fought for 8 months. The pediatric team that cared for him, they became my models for the kind of doctor I wanted to be. The kind who remembers there's a family falling apart around each sick child. I reached across the table without thinking, covering his hand with mine. His skin was warm despite the rain chill. I'm so sorry, Daniel. I didn't know. How could you have, he said gently. We lost touch. The question of why hung in the air between us, why we'd let go so easily of something that had once seemed so essential. But I knew the answer, at least my half of it. I'd been terrified of becoming an anchor, of holding him back from the future he'd planned. So I'd let him go with a smile, crying only after his car had disappeared from view. As midnight approached, we moved to the couch, Fitzgerald grudgingly making room. The storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows as we gradually moved from the safe territory of career and mutual acquaintances to the more dangerous ground of relationships and regrets. Why didn't you ever get married? He asked, turning his mug in his hands. I considered deflecting but found myself wanting to offer him honesty instead. I came close once, 3 years ago. James. He was kind, stable, exactly what I thought I needed. I paused. 2 weeks before the wedding, I realized I was marrying the idea of security rather than the man. That was brave, Daniel said. Walking away. It didn't feel brave. It felt selfish. His family had already flown in from Australia. I tucked my feet under me on the couch. What about you? What happened with your marriage? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Cynthia and I met during residency. Both of us working 100-hour weeks, barely seeing daylight. The hospital became our whole world. When we finally came up for air, we realized we'd built a relationship on shared trauma and coffee machine conversations rather than compatibility. He looked up at me. She's remarried now. Happier. We're actually friends. That's unusually mature, I said with a small smile. Well, one of us had to be the adult, and it certainly wasn't me during the divorce. His self-deprecating grin was so familiar it made my heart ache. I believe I threw at least one stethoscope in anger. A crack of thunder made us both jump, and suddenly we were laughing, the kind of deep, tension-breaking laughter that feels like a release valve for emotions too complicated to name. When our laughter faded, I became acutely aware of how close we were sitting, of the diminishing space between us on the couch. His eyes met mine, and I recognized the question in them, the same one echoing in my chest. I thought about you, he said softly. More than I should have. Me too, I admitted, the words barely audible above the rain. Neither of us moved for what felt like an eternity. Then lightning flashed, illuminating the room in stark white light, and in that moment of clarity, Daniel leaned forward. His lips were soft against mine, tentative at first, then certain as I responded. The kiss deepened, years of what-ifs and might-have-beens dissolving in the connection. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheek with such tenderness that I felt something break open inside me, a seal on a chamber of my heart I'd locked away long ago. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and dazed, the power went out. The apartment plunged into darkness, save for the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. Perfect timing, I whispered, and felt rather than saw his smile. I should probably go, he said, though he made no move to leave. Stay, I said, surprising myself again. Just, stay until the storm passes. We talked until dawn in the darkened apartment, by candlelight after I found my emergency stash. We talked about dreams abandoned and new ones discovered. About the people we'd become and the parts of ourselves we'd lost along the way. About regret and possibility. I don't believe in fate, Daniel said as the first gray light of morning filtered through the windows, the storm finally subsiding. But running into you last night, it feels significant. Maybe it doesn't have to be fate, I said, my head resting against his shoulder. Maybe it's just two people who once knew each other well, finding their way back to something worth exploring. I'd like to explore it, he said, his fingers intertwined with mine. If you would. As the rain tapped gently against the windows, no longer a downpour but a soft reminder of the night's intensity, I realized that sometimes life offers unexpected detours back to paths we were meant to walk all along. I would, I said, and sealed the promise with another kiss. That rainy night changed everything for me. It taught me that sometimes, the most profound beginnings happen when we least expect them, when we're drenched to the bone, struggling with a broken umbrella, and convinced we have our lives figured out. In the months that followed, Daniel and I rebuilt what we'd once had, but stronger this time, fortified by the people we'd become in the years apart. The challenges weren't small, his demanding schedule, my stubborn independence, the ghosts of our separate pasts. There were arguments and misunderstandings, moments when we questioned whether we were foolish to try again. But there were also Sunday mornings reading in companionable silence, his hand absently stroking my hair. Nights when he'd call exhausted after losing a patient, and I'd remind him of all the ones he'd saved. Afternoons when he'd surprise me at the bookstore with coffee and steal kisses between the shelves. On the anniversary of that rainy night, Daniel brought me back to the spot where we'd reconnected outside Harper and Tales. The rain cooperated, falling in sheets just as it had a year before. Under the same awning, with water pooling around our feet, he knelt and opened a small box containing a vintage emerald ring. Second chances are rare, he said, his voice steady despite the rain dripping from his hair. I don't want to waste this one. I said yes as thunder rolled overhead, sealing our future with a kiss as the elements celebrated around us. Sometimes life's most beautiful chapters begin in the most ordinary circumstances, a broken umbrella, a chance encounter, one rainy night, one unexpected kiss. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to open ourselves to possibility, those ordinary moments become the foundation of extraordinary lives. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales that remind us of life's unexpected magic. Sometimes the most meaningful connections happen when we least expect them, and sometimes, just sometimes, the universe gives us a second chance to get it right.